Do you have a great admiration for people who don't even exist? Do you know histories of fake worlds better than you know your own? Do you geek out? If so, geek out with us. Here, now. It's the Geek for All Show.
It is indeed the Geek for All Show. I am your host, Geekmeister, and we're having a little bit of a change-up around here. As you've been hearing, the professor has been dealing with some pretty extreme catastrophes in his laboratory, and apparently now the feds have gotten involved, and he may or may not be in Tijuana. It wasn't too clear on the text. But for all intents and purposes, Winchester over here is now our new official co-host. Yay! We do wish the professor well with everything that he's doing, and hope that he is able to come back and visit us occasionally, but we understand. But anyway, so tonight, it's, tomorrow is, or yesterday by the time you're hearing it, is Halloween, and there's something very scary that we've been avoiding here, and that is, of course, the new Ghostbusters movie. We avoided it for a long time. We figured, if we were going to get nothing else together for a Halloweenish episode, we might as well do the review on the friggin' movie.
It finally came out on DVD.
So we were willing to pay for it.
We could have easily not.
Yeah, we really could have. But okay. So one thing I'd like to say right off the bat is it has gotten a lot of unfair flack to a certain extent. It is not the catastrophe that it has been made out to be.
Yeah.
That being said, it was pretty bad.
I would give it like a solid C? Maybe? You can't compare it to the originals.
Oh god, no.
Like, we have to start off, you cannot
start
compare
off there, because if you do compare it to the originals, it is getting an F.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I will say this too. For a movie that really needed to not be compared to the originals, they went out of their way to make references to the originals far too often, which is why people are doing it. Like, normally, yes, you have that mentality of, okay, I'm not going to compare this to the first one. I'm going to let it be its own thing. It was really hard to do that with this movie. We'll get into that in a little while as part of its problems, but that made it really hard. But if you can pull yourself back and give it a fair rating as it is, I think a C is fair.
Yeah.
I think we were discussing it. I think what we kind of came to the conclusion of is if this had been a movie that existed by itself, it would have been a fun summer blockbuster that no one would remember a year from now.
Right. You would have maybe bought the DVD, and then you would have forgotten it in like a back corner of a basement, and then been like, oh hey, this piece of crap. Remember that?
10 years later, like, that was fun.
And then you create a drinking game out of it, and then
this thing is very drinking game-able for sure. Like if there's something to be said, you could definitely make a drinking game out of this.
Definitely.
Anytime weird girl is weird. Anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the movie starts off having familiar tones to the first one, but it set itself apart and made itself its own thing right off the bat, which, okay, solid, good start. I noticed a problem, though, almost immediately when they decided that the first, 10 minutes of the movie needed to be a CGI orgasm fest, right off the bat. I knew we were going to have problems, right? So kind of in a way, like the first one starts, there's a guy just doing his job. Now, in this one, he's giving a tour of a house that kind of has got a haunted element to, and he's playing that up, and actually, he's got this candle that, knocks itself off of the, a table that it was on, and he can remotely control that action.
Right, it's supposed to be a hoax. And
Yeah. So, I mean, but it is still person just kind of doing their job in a sort of, inherently creepy place, and the ghost is going to reveal itself to, which that was done very nicely and everything.
Yeah.
But it wasn't this. It just kind of drove right for it. Which again, if you're not comparing it to the first one, is fine. But again, it was something that was, it was a point that was clearly paying homage to the first one while simultaneously, and we'll talk about this a bit. It's a trend that pops up a lot. There are things that they just continue. I've never seen somebody. It was almost beautiful, actually, in this regard. It was beautiful in the way that they were able to continuously homage the old films without paying them any regard whatsoever.
Yeah.
But okay, so the opening is okay. Like you got Guy, and he encounters ghosts and stuff, and we see like this. We see this thing that I feel like we shouldn't have seen in that first scene. As far as a movie in and of itself, that's the first thing I'm going to drop as a unique to the movie complaint. There's literally a plot device in this movie. Actually, there's a lot of plot devices. Literally plot devices that are technology that exists for no other reason than to move plot forward in a very, very specifically built around that device kind of way. Like there's so many. Actually, that could be a drinking game by itself. The plot devices could be a drinking. Anyway, so one of the plot devices is this machine that makes ghosts easier to manifest. Like there's more power for them to draw off of, and they can break the veil a little bit more easily. And so you see a glimpse of that machine. That should not have happened in this first scene. That I feel like you should have seen a glimpse of that. Like for the second one, when they encounter the ghosts in the railway system, where they're going to meet Lissa Jones' character. I don't remember any of the character's name. Patty? Okay.
Patty.
Where they're going to meet Patty, and that's the scene where you should have actually seen that device for the first time, or there should have been some other scene that they worked it in. They worked it in immediately in the beginning, and like. It was obvious that you were supposed to be paying attention to it, and it was very obvious that like anytime that you saw it, like, oh, pay close attention now, kiddies.
It could have very well been. So that's the opening. It follows the Ghostbuster formula. If you remember from the first one, you've got a ghost in a library and like scares the librarian, etc., cue plot. That plot device could have very easily come when the group of three women, the quote-unquote Ghostbusters, come back to investigate the ghost.
Yep.
It could have been shown then, because then it correlates to the actual main characters.
Yes.
But they didn't. They kind of just started it right off the bat, which in the Ghostbusters formula, the plot never really starts at the beginning. You get the introduction, you get the this is what our life is like, but the like main paranormal plot doesn't really start.
Yeah, in a theatrical setting, you would almost make arguments for that the inciting action may have actually taken place off stage.
Right, exactly.
It'd be one of those kind of things, which of course, if you talk to theater majors, some of them love that concept. Some of them insist that that's not even a possibility. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but that's kind of that is what you did in the. But again, looking at it as own objective film, that's fine that we get like more of a substantiated background and it's a little bit more fleshed out in this one, and we don't just jump right into things.
Right.
But we don't get a flashback either, which is nice. We don't like go back to the beginning of like when they were kids and because they seemed more focused on the background in this than they did in the other movies.
Yeah,
they wanted,
relationships.
That was something that they did want to highlight in this film, which is fine. Neither here nor there. And I think again they did it without doing flashbacks, which is good. Flashbacks are fine and dandy to a certain extent, but I think they get overused these days.
Yeah, they definitely can, especially when you go back to like childhood traumas or things like that. But you get for this one, I do have to give them credit that they give them a backstory that you get the main character played by Kristen Wiig, Erin. You get actually this almost like frightening backstory because she talks about being haunted by her dead neighbor. And the ghost of this woman stood at the foot of her bed every night for a year, and nobody believed her. And she became ghost. Like, she would try and tell people at school. She tried to tell her parents. They sent her to therapy. Her fellow students mocked her, called her Ghost Girl. Like, it's a very almost frightening kind of idea to happen to a little kid. And you understand why she goes into that field and why she also leaves that field. Because of the actually the same mockery. The same mockery that she encountered in the first place causes her to kind of like pull back on that. For sure. And I thought it was a nice moment that was utterly rushed through like crazy. Definitely.
That was the other big thing with this movie in general, is that there was a lot of rushing, and I feel that has a lot to do again with that like homage paying that wasn't even really paying very much homage, because again they ignored anyway. But okay, so the movie starts off, and again it plays through the basic beats of the old stories.
Yeah. It's mostly the first movie because they do the haunting in the beginning, and then you see the first scientist who is trying to make a life being a regular scientist, and at the same time basically trying to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And then you find the kooky sidekick. Here they're a little more estranged than the original group. But they're more involved in the paranormal than the normal person, I guess you could say, the normal guy.
Right. Well, because Wig is definitely Bill Murray's character.
Oh, yeah.
He's definitely Peter Venkman character.
Absolutely.
Because, yeah, that was the whole thing. He was actually, well, not conducting very sound experiments, but conducting experiments that existed in a far more respected field.
Well, more credible.
A more credible field,
right.
Certainly. Because it was still dealing with psychic energy and stuff, but it was dealing with a much more tangible explanation for certain things.
Right.
He was that scene where he's shocking that kid, and he keeps not shocking the girl in order to be able to ask her out.
Yeah. But then you get the other poor. When it was okay to experiment on students.
Yep.
And pay them $10 and be like, here you go, kid. Sorry I electrocuted you for the past 2 hours. And broke you.
You know what, though? To this film's credit, actually, the amount of trouble that they get into almost immediately for trying to do their thing is pretty nice. That they updated that, because you feel like like watching the first Ghostbusters now, you have some questions about why was nobody stopping them? Well, back in the 80s, not everybody, we didn't have the internet and shit, so it took time for people to realize, hey, there are these guys, pretending to have sirens and shit, going down the street, you know what I mean? So to a certain extent, they did a good job with updating it for
bringing
the
it into
world.
2016.
Yeah, for sure.
There's YouTube, there's Reddit, the news, obviously, but it's very instant.
And it all plays into it in a very nice way.
Yeah.
I feel like that was accomplished very well. Man, the more and more we're talking and we're trying to go along, and both of us are desperately trying to bring up points that are just about the movie as itself. And seriously, we keep having such a hard time with it because it's and the annoying part is that the director came out and blamed the first movies for why his movie wasn't good.
Yeah.
Which, first of all, no, you don't do that. It doesn't matter how much merit you might have in that statement, which I will back you up in a second, but you still don't make that statement in the first place. You have any idea how whiny you sound about that?
Yeah.
Man, come on, just own it. Well, we saw it differently. We saw this as working, and in the moment everything felt right, and I'm just very sorry that audiences didn't feel the same. That's how you handle that. You don't blame the original. Oh my god. Anyway.
No, especially when you credit the original, and
that's the big thing. And to a certain extent, if you had done your film ignoring the first one in its entirety, other than the namesake and some of the basic plot structural points to it and everything, you may have had some merit with that argument. You still don't make that argument, but you may have had some merit to that argument. You wanted to suck the dick of the first film so bad, dude. Seriously.
Yeah. This movie really struggled to find its own. It's like one of those kids who tries to go out in the world and they're like, fuck you, mom and dad, I don't need your money. And then they come back and be like, well, can you pay for my cell phone bill?
Yes.
Because there's so many things, we were talking about it when we were watching, that the original Ghostbusters had so many iconic moments. You've got the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. You've got the iconic lines that anybody can quote. You start in the beginning, and anybody can finish any quote from those movies. Maybe not so much the second one, but definitely the first one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the "Are you a god?" quote.
Yeah. Just anything. Zool. You say the word Zool.
And it bring that man is a dick.
Yeah. Exactly. You get all of those moments. And it tried publicity. I think that's what it was marketing and publicity wise. It was like the two entities couldn't get on the same wavelength. The movie wanted to pay respect to the originals and throw back to the originals, and the marketing side of it was no, hold on, we have to be original, and we have to say screw you to the originals.
By the way, what a weird reversal to the norm in that kind of situation.
Right.
Because normally it's marketing being well, we gotta match the things from the old time, and it's the new creators being yeah, but we want to do it differently. And maybe that was a big problem, is that you had the voices on the wrong sides of the argument.
It was very mixed signals of like, I wanted to laugh at the in-jokes. I wanted to be like, you know what? She is like the new Egon. I'm fine with that. But then there were moments where you're like, where they would fight against it. They're like, okay, we're gonna use the logo, and we're gonna bring back Slimer, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do that. Oh, but wait. No, she's quirkier. It's fine. Or, you know, we're not really doing this.
Well, it's not even that she's quirkier. It's that whole thing of like, they wanted to do the quirky while mixing it with like it like she's been to a rave or two or something like that, like type of situation. But you know what it was for me? They pushed that end of it too hard. The like, I'm actually a badass under all this kookiness thing.
Yeah.
Like, fine, but you don't have to prove that you're a badass under that And that's what it felt like she was doing the entire time, was like, I'm going to prove that I'm awesome and I don't care. And then I'm going to make sure that you know that I don't care, because I don't care.
Yeah, it was a very and we're talking about Kate McKinnon's character. It was a very weird, like, Egon. So Egon had the quirkiness and the awkwardness. You know, like, he collects certain fungi.
I love Egon.
And like, he doesn't quite get it when Janine hits on him, that kind of stuff. But then you've got Kate McKinnon's character, who is supposed to be the new Egon. At least from like what we can make as parallels.
Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty obvious parallels in this.
But she's quirky, and she had some great lines. There were certain lines where you're like, yes, I love it, and then she'd ruin it.
Right. That was like, especially with her character. I need to stop saying like so much. Especially with her character, I felt as though more than anything else, I wanted to laugh.
I wanted to like,
and didn't. Like, that was the thing. I wanted to laugh. I wasn't actually laughing at all that much. Don't get me wrong. That movie a couple of times made me laugh out loud and pretty hard. But they were cameo moments.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, like, you know, like, they were original lines. You know who had original lines that actually made me laugh out loud like that? Jones's character.
Yeah, Leslie Jones'
character. Patty was actually the only one who I felt like everyone else in their role didn't feel comfortable. That was the thing of it.
I think that's what it was.
Really didn't seem like they were comfortable doing the things that they were doing, except for her. She was perfectly in her element. She was actually very entertaining throughout the entire movie. And the whole, like, there was obviously, like, some kind of, like, questionably racist undertones going on with that character throughout. But being that she's a parallel to
Ernie's character,
you know, that sort of makes sense. And they did it fairly tastefully. And lines that I thought I was going to hate much more, like, actually, when it came time for the power of pain compels you, I actually laughed. That line's actually funny in context. I don't know why they pulled it aside for the movie trailer as though that was going to be funny, because it's really only funny in the moment. Like, once, like, in the context of everything happening, it's actually really, really entertaining. But, you know, they decided to showcase it too early without the context. And again, like, in the sense of, like, the way that they were paying homage, like, that's almost a good way of putting it, I feel like. They were trying to pay homage without having the proper context.
Yeah. And I think that's what it was. And it's sad because it's such a great cast.
It's a phenomenal cast.
You have Kristen Wiig and you have Melissa McCarthy, who both were on Bridesmaids, which is a phenomenal movie in itself. You've got these two comedic just entities who are so good, and then you've got all these SNL people. You've got Leslie Jones, you've got Kate McKinnon, who's rather new to the scene.
And for cameo's sakes, they brought back like everybody from those old movies, everyone except for Rick Moranis and
Harold Ramis, who passed away a couple years ago.
So, you know, so and Rick Moranis hasn't been doing acting for a long time. So it made sense that neither of those two showed up, but they got everybody else back to do cameos, which, again, were fun. But so, again, you got this phenomenal cast. You got these people who are coming back just to do cameos, but are still involved to a certain extent, are at least probably saying things about filming the original ones and stuff as
Right.
they're passing. Like, are you listening to anybody who's just having conversation? Because I guarantee those actresses were having conversations about things that didn't quite feel right. They had to have. Like, the way that this whole thing was acted, like, something for somebody. Somebody had to say something about something not feeling right at some point that you didn't listen to. I feel that in my gut as a tree on this one.
Yeah, you had all these great comedic people. We talked a little bit about, when we were watching it, about Chris Hemsworth, who is, you don't get to see a lot of comedic stuff from Chris Hemsworth. If you don't know the name, you know Thor, and he plays Thor. And every so often in the,
He is the creamy deliciousness.
He is. He's so pretty. And in Thor, you get, especially the first one, you get some comedic stuff from him, but Thor's a little more serious of a character. Chris gets to do so much great work in
he
this
was
movie
really entertaining in this movie.
because he's the big dumb golden retriever that just kind of bounces around and is like, okay, I'm gonna go get my suitcases and moving, guys, and I'm gonna answer the phone and not really answer it, but I'm pretty, so it's okay. And he become,
He was actually also the other part where they did something where they imitated the old Ghostbusters movie, but had a totally different spin on it. Because, so he's obviously Janine from, I think that's the character's name, the
Janine.
old secretary. Janine from the old secretary. And in the original Ghostbusters, the gag was she's not the hot, pretty secretary. She's actually competent and isn't somebody that you're going to go hit on like you would typically see in movies of those days. They made her real, a actual person, and more importantly, capable of keeping up with them as far as their wit goes. Like whenever Bill Murray would like say anything to her, she would throw it right back in his face every time, and it was amazing. And and for this one, what they did, they took the approach of, no, we're going to go with that dumb secretary thing, but it's going to be a guy. And so they got Chris Hemsworth because, I mean, like, I'm not gay, but good Lord, he is good looking. Seriously, like, it's not fair.
It's really not. And he's so pretty, and you get to watch him kind of pull out the comedic side of him. And
which was a lot of fun to watch.
It was.
I actually expected him to be much more of a straight man than anything else, which he was not at
No,
all. He did not do any. He was not straight man stuff. It was really, really fun to watch him just be this goofball.
What was the line? He turns to everybody and he goes, "What was it? The aquarium is a submarine for fish."
Yes.
And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, "Well, yes." But okay, honey, go sit in the corner and be pretty.
Oh man, no, that was, and that was one of the lines that actually made me like laugh like right out. That was the thing. Like the things that actually made me like really genuinely laugh were some of the places where I think they had hit their balance between doing something new and paying homage. But again, it was because in those moments they actually understood the homage a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, because like we've said we've talked plenty of good and bad stuff, but we keep going back to this old movie, and here's the problem. I'm just gonna lay it out. Between the plot structure and about 20 different sight gags, including like on-camera appearances by people like Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
This movie was just deeply wanting to be the original Ghostbusters, but here's the things that they missed about it. First of all, your entire movie was about plot devices. Which, not that there aren't plot devices, like those the lasers from Ghostbusters are infamous, and they're obviously plot devices, but not plot devices for the sake of developing plot. They are literally plot devices in that they like, okay, we have to get around this plot. They need some way to be able to capture the ghosts. Oh, let's make it like a cool laser thing so we can like have it look flashy and everything. Perfect, great. So but this was literally, they created things to make a plot around the thing that they created. And where this really becomes problematic is the main plot device is that this guy is creating a machine that is letting ghosts through. And I don't understand what was so hard to grasp about the new paradigm that they were setting up for storytelling in the Ghostbusters. Not like really new, all that new, but like, the classic man versus nature, man versus self, man versus man type of thing. This was more technology versus superstition. That's what the old Ghostbusters was about. Right. So if you have a machine delivering the ghosts and machines fighting it, you don't have that dynamic anymore. So right off the bat, your script is like already in horrendous amounts of trouble. Especially if you're not going to keep it original, which again, they didn't. Another problem is that the pacing was completely all over the place. They clearly wanted to highlight, like, hit some of the same, like, notes, like, you know, like they find the first ghost, they get kicked out of the institute where they had been working and stuff.
Yeah. They struggle for a little bit, but then they get a really good catch, but then the mayor doesn't like it, and then they get kicked in the gutter.
Again, all of those same plot, but it was, they decided to just, like, rush through the plot points for the sake of sight gags, and in some case, like, flesh out things that probably didn't really need fleshing out. Like, the entire, like, their first big catch is a rock concert, which I know that they did it at a public place in the first one, but they're still, their big first catch was still done in secret with only the aftermath to be seen of it.
Yeah.
In this one, they do it in front of people, so now it's going to become an issue, like, immediately. You gave it no chance to breathe before, and that was the other thing, too, is that they rushed right into that first everything up until that first concert was just like, okay, go, we gotta get this done so that we can fire the lasers. The lasers have to fire. Go. That seemed like that was the entire point. Like, get to lasers as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, get to that badass rollout of the revamped theme, the new car, and kind of, it was almost like they started the movie there.
Yep.
And it wasn't really a turning point for the movie. It was just kind of it was another stop along the way, and we missed so many great things, and there was some weird editing. And we talk about that with Suicide Squad too, that there were certain points where you're like, you know, they end the scene and then they start another scene that doesn't really make sense on where it was.
And even in one scene, I think did the Suicide Squad thing where they went back to a scene that could have just been one. I don't remember where it was,
yes.
But I remember there was like they jumped to something else and then back to the scene where they were at, and it was like, why?
Right.
Why did you? Anyway, I don't remember what that was. I only caught it like once, whereas Suicide Squad was like 3 or 4 times. I was like, why are you doing? Anyway, but then like the other thing, like so again, like as far as problems with where they failed in matching up with the original movies, just on like some core concept levels, there was a love story in that first movie.
Yeah.
And unlike a lot of love stories in movies, it wasn't really shoehorned in. It actually was a part of the plot, and it actually felt right being there. Like it added to the movie. It wasn't detracting, and again, because she winds up being one of the, you know, being possessed by one of like the summoners of Zool, like it actually winds up mattering that she's there and stuff. And we had none of that. Like the most you had was the Bill Murray character hitting on the secretary character, because now that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
But other than that, you didn't have that. So right off the bat, you've got the story that you're trying to follow, but you don't understand its pacing. You've changed the basic versus narrative to something that's like, it's now again just man versus man, as opposed to this interesting concept of superstition versus technology. And you failed to actually put a love story that humanizes the whole thing. Now, granted, they managed to do the humanizing nature in other aspects, but again, for how heavily they wanted this to apparently to be Ghostbusters, they failed to utilize the human aspect in the same way, or in at least a close enough way. Like, if nothing else, if you didn't want to do a love story, there could have been a friendship story of some kind that could have mirrored what was going on with Venkman
and Ray.
Right, yeah. And there was nothing. So right off the bat, 3 of the more important things you need to be paying attention to if you're going to like really, really be up on the old films, which clearly the writers of these wanted to be. Like, there's no question. You missed out. Like you missed like 3 huge criteria. You know, you're pacing the story, your concept of what the story is about, and then the fluff pieces on top were just all wrong. And so you start a script there, you're going to be in trouble already. And the fact of the matter is, when they realized that they had something that totally was... Actually, that might be the problem. They may have never realized how far off the mark that they were. That's the really sad and unfortunate part, is that the entire time this could have gone through, and it's possible nobody really made the connection that in theme, in storytelling, and in humanity, they did not match the original film at all. And if they did not notice that, and notice that there were only these surface visuals that connected them, they might have been able to realize, no, we've got a very different thing on our hand. We need to separate ourselves from the script, forget the cameos and everything. You know, obviously we'll still do Ozzy because that was actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
But other than that,
but original cast cameos.
Yeah, yes. Just don't do with those and tell a new story because it's too far different. But you stuck the original Ghostbusters all through this thing. I kept trying to watch it with virgin eyes, and you wouldn't let me. You wouldn't let me do it. And it was very frustrating, honestly, because, again, I wanted to like this movie. And you know what? I think ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the actresses working on this movie wanted to like this movie, but somewhere deep down, they knew something was off, because there's something off about what they're doing. And I've seen, certainly at least Melissa McCarthy enough times and enough different things to know she can bring it way harder than what she did in this film.
Definitely.
And not that she did badly, but this is one of those ones where you're just like, oh, you would have expected this to be one of those films that she did because she needed some cash at the time, and it just worked out well, and it was going to help her do like a project that she was actually really interested in, because the studio wouldn't sign off on it until the popcorn stuffer, made fit. How Hollywood works. Sometimes you have to play that game. That's not what this is, though. This was a redoing of an iconic film. And we started this episode off trying really desperately to be like, all right, we're gonna review it as it is. And as we talk more and more, I'm more and more convinced you can't even do that, because they wouldn't let you do that. They literally would not let you forget for 1 second. You're watching Ghostbusters. Hey guys, it's Ghostbusters. Hey, just in case you weren't aware, this is a Ghostbusters movie. Oh my God, shut up.
And I think that's exactly what it was. It was very frustrating to watch it, and I wanted to separate it. I wanted to give it a chance because I loved all the actors that were in it. I love every single one of them, and they kept dragging it back. And like the little moments, like the logo or the car or the joke where they can't afford so they're trying to find a lab. And they pull the same thing where a realtor shows up and they're like, oh, hey, how about this old firehouse? And it's, of course, the original firehouse from the Ghostbusters. Showing that firehouse, funny, fine, okay. But even, it was almost like the cameos made it too hard to pull away, because they spaced them out so well. And, okay, fine, bring Bill Murray back as some guy who doesn't believe in ghosts.
But then make him the only one or something.
But then make him the only one.
Like, the fact that you drag back everybody else, like, granted, it was nice to nod to them, too. But if you're going to only bring back one person, Bill Murray is obviously the person you bring back.
Right. And it was
you only needed the one.
It was very frustrating to want to separate and then being dragged back to not separating it. Especially because I think if it had started off as the original story that it was going to be, where it was going to be the next generation of Ghostbusters.
Yes, and actually,
it would have been fine.
Scenes that, okay, that one scene where they were talking about like it's happened before and nobody knows. Anyone else feel like that was totally written when that was still in mind?
Yeah.
Like there was just some dialogue in certain scenes, that one in particular, but there were dialogue in certain scenes that made you feel like they literally like wrote a script with that in mind and then didn't like, really, you just reuse the script? And like, we'll just touch it up to change. Really? At that point, you're not going to just rewrite it? You're going to just shoehorn the new concept just right in there? And why? Why would you not just rewrite it at that point? Like, oh, we're not going to do the daughters? Okay, this script is just out in the trash. Ghostbusters 3 is not ever going to be a thing. Goodbye. We're going to do a new thing. And actually about the fact that it's like females and stuff, how to say this? The fact that the movie has gotten as much flack that it has, and that people were mad about it before we had seen anything about it, is unequivocally and sadly because it was women involved with it.
Right, which is bullshit.
Which is bullshit. Which is utter bullshit.
Because there's been proven time and time again that Again, I'm going to bring it back to Bridesmaids, because Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy are in it. If you haven't seen Bridesmaids, it's fucking hilarious. and you can show that an entire female cast can carry a comedy, but your writing has to support it.
Yes, exactly. And that was what I was going to say. On the flip side of this whole thing, all of these people who are freaking out and telling other people that they're misogynists and don't like women because they had an opinion about this movie, you need to stop. I can't remember which reviewer I was watching, but she said that this is almost like a false flag situation for feminism. Like, really? Like, this is not the thing you need to be getting upset about. The fact that people were upset about it before anything had come out, yeah, sure. Get a little bit upset about that. Get a little offended about that. The fact that people didn't like it when everything was in and said and done, that is not, and there are so many more important things to be worrying about than that. Like, seriously, let it go. It's okay that something like this is bad. And in fact, if you don't admit that, you're doing a disservice to the movement that you are supposedly a part of.
Yeah, you can't. Well, and you can't blame the full female cast on this one. Like,
no.
They were all phenomenal. So saying it's shit and not seeing it, saying it's shit before you see it because there's a female cast is bullshit.
Yes.
Saying it's shit after you've seen it because of the poor writing or anything else, and possibly the fact that the full female cast didn't necessarily pull off what they were trying to do, fine. But at least you have a backup of the writing was shit. Maybe you didn't like the casting, because some people don't like Kristen Wiig or Melissa McCarthy or anybody else, so fine. But especially in the beginning where they were like, oh, it's all female cast, it's going to be totally ruined.
Well, and obviously that is horrible. If you heard somebody say that, like, you can go ahead and safely assume some things about them for sure.
Yeah.
But just because somebody says that they don't like Ghostbusters, do not jump down their throat. Sorry, the only reason I say this is because I work with somebody who does that.
Yeah.
And I had yet to see it. And my whole thing was actually just along the lines of, like, well, because I wasn't impressed by that first trailer. Oh, what? Because blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Sorry, personal issues. Anyway. But again, I believe, because the other part of this too is that if you weren't throwing back to the old Ghostbusters, you would have actually had time to, I don't know, flesh out plot points and screw you, phone. I'm sure the microphone just picked that up. Anyway, if this had existed and only existed and the other Ghostbusters had never existed, you would have had time to flesh out this movie in the way that it needed to be fleshed out.
Definitely.
Because you weren't trying to, like, work with schedules and get cameos in and do things last minute and be fancy and flashy. And what this then might have been, again, decent summer blockbuster that everyone would have forgotten about. And that's really the best you can say, unfortunately, about this.
Yeah.
Like, and it is really, really disappointing in a lot of ways. I have nothing against the actors who did anything with it. I think that they're still fantastic. I am super excited to be seeing Melissa McCarthy back at Suki.
Yes, Gilmore Girls.
In just a little bit for Gilmore Girls, which is dropping in November on Netflix. Yay! But yeah, no. End of the day,
it was rough.
It was rough, and I want to give this thing a grade in an abstract world, but I can't even do that. So sorry, giving this one an F, like, all the way, like.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was Ghostbusters. This has been the Geek for All. Sorry that we dedicated an entire episode to shit, although we've done that in the past. It's important to talk about why something failed, you know, and to give good reason behind it if it did in fact fall flat on its ass, which this did. But anyway, that is enough. We're way past the 30-minute mark. I'm not sure what we're gonna be doing next week in the next episode, not next week. But we will figure it out, and we'll be getting back to you, and we hope that you folks have an excellent evening.
Bye.
Bye.
The music for the Geek for All show has been provided by Fat Street Beats, Ben Sound, and Purple Planet. Please support their individual pages.